So welcome, Will, to this interview for the Bylines Network podcast. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here, and we're going to cover some immediate issues and things that we see in the world. Really pleased to introduce you to one of our fantastic editors-in-chief who runs our Northeast Bylines publication, is Yvonne Wancke, who's here with us.
I'm a great fan of Bylines. I think you do a great job.
Excellent.
Yeah, there's a lot to do, a lot to write about. My God.
Yeah.
There is, absolutely, yes. So I'll hand over to Yvonne, who's got the first question for you, which is very topical.
Great to meet you, Will. I'm going to start with Donald Trump, maybe no surprises. So Donald Trump has just announced a baseline tariff of 10% on all imports to the United States. Can you break down for us what the tariffs mean in real terms and tell us where you think the economic road that we're now on with the US leads?
Yeah, that's a big question. Could take the next half an hour.
Yeah, I'm sure.
First of all, I'm struck by the way these tariffs are calculated. It's from a mindset of victimhood. I mean, brutally, it's more akin to the thinking of a mafia hood than it is of an elected Democratic politician. What's happened is that the team have just said, whatever we import from whatever country around the world, we're going to literally halve that as a proxy for kind of the degree to which we think we're being pillaged, raped, ravaged. I mean, the words that Trump uses are extraordinary. And then you come up with these tariff numbers. I mean, if you want to buy a diamond, you have to buy it from Lesotho. But it doesn't matter that kind of you can't get diamonds from elsewhere. The world's best diamonds come from Lesotho. But actually, it's suffering one of the worst kind of tariffs because on this very simple mathematical formula that Trump's using, he's suggesting that Lesotho is actually kind of pillaging and raping America. And to make America great again, you've got to kind of bring Lesotho to its knees. I mean, the thinking is just extraordinary. You have the richest country in the world imposing swingeing tariffs to some of the poorest countries in the world of that very, very simple formula. Most of those very poor countries, the only thing they've got to sell are kind of things like diamonds or lumber or copper or whatever it might be. And they sell it into to America because still the world's biggest economy in the world, 25% of world GDP. So it's a kind of complete inversion of thinking. It opens up lots of discretionary possibilities for the president. So, for example, and it's kind of the thinking of a mafia hood, TikTok, owned by the Chinese, are having to sell before the weekend. We're recording this on April the 3rd. Trump has lined up the head of a private equity company who is a Trump supporter to buy TikTok at a knockdown price. This is a story about favoring friends, giving side deals. We're entering a vengeful mafia world in which the boss can give favors or execute you as he chooses. I mean, Al Capone had nothing on this. That's the kind of context of it. Why is it important? It's a complete rupture of the way we've tried to organize the world economy since the Second World War. And that Second World War resulted from policies in the late 20s and early 30s that kind of induced slump. Indeed, tariffs are higher. These tariffs are higher than the tariffs in 1928-9, the Smoot-Hawley tariffs, that interacted with kind of overblown asset prices and lots of indebtedness to provoke the Great Depression of 1929-31. And I've no doubt this is going to do the same. We understand better the dynamics of recessions and slumps than we did then, and maybe the world can avert it, but it requires collaboration. And who wants to collaborate with the mafia hood? And does the mafia hood want to collaborate with the rest of the world? I mean, I think things are really serious. The UK, there's a lot of kind of the Brexiters like Jacob Rees-Mogg and others are trumpeting, whoa, we've got only a 10% tariff because, that's the result of being outside the European Union. Truth be told, on American numbers, America runs a trade surplus with the United Kingdom. And actually, we should not have a tariff at all. The idea that there's a kind of, that you can curry favor with Trump. I mean, Netanyahu's a bigger friend to Trump than actually we are, and still he got hit with very bad tariffs. So it's a formulaic thing. It's a formulaic thing which is done by a bully, and also around false economics. One of the reasons why the Irish kind of have a big trade surplus with the United States is because a lot of American companies, particularly life science companies and car companies and all kinds of companies, have located in Ireland to export back to the United States and to Europe and Africa because shipping costs are cheaper from Dublin. And they brought dollars into Ireland. They built factories in Ireland. Everything is denominated in dollars. And when those exports go back around the world, they're all denominated in dollars. And the profits get repatriated to the United States. Doubtless accounting will be used to take the profits in the most low tax jurisdiction. In this sense, America has a deficit with itself. I mean, the big American companies exporting out of Ireland to the United States, all in dollars. It's as if really Ireland was actually Long Island or Rhode Island, because But suddenly, kind of because it's the jurisdiction of kind of the Irish government, they're deemed to be pillaging the United States. I know Keir Starmer wants to keep a level head and keep cool. In a way, I understand that, and it may be the best approach, but ultimately we're entering a world in which kind of big blocks and big sticks, and I suspect that being with our biggest trading bloc, the European Union, will be a wiser course of action over years ahead than actually being piggy in the middle. So look, I hope I've set it out for you.
It's really interesting to hear that analysis, kind of almost hot off the press, really. I know we knew Trump's tariffs were coming, but the passion that pours out of you around these issues and the clear analysis of it, detailed but clear analysis of it. Before we started recording, we talked about the kind of journey from the state we're in as the best-selling economics book since the Second World War to this time No Mistakes last year, and all the stuff in between, from being an investment banker to editing at The Guardian and Newsnight, president of the Academy of Social Sciences, and that commitment to trying to find fairness. I'm interested in where the passion started for you, where that commitment came from.
Well, I don't understand where it came from myself, and I often ask myself the question, where did it come from? Where does this commitment to... it is fairness. I mean, I'm often described as kind of, standard bearer of the liberal left, or kind of leading liberal left intellectual and all the rest of it. But I mean, I've never thought of myself as kind of notably kind of liberal left. I don't see a better system than capitalism on offer, although I want to make it work for the common good. I've been offended by unfairness, ever since I can remember, ever since being a little toddler. I'm lucky that I've got articulate. Again, that was a thing I didn't discover until when I was 27 or 28, when I went and did an MBA at INSEAD, and they carve you out into groups of 7, 8, 9 people, and I was an English speaker in my group, and consequently I was asked to write the reports. And it was a couple of the fellows, one a Belgian actually, who said, "My God, you write good English. Have you thought about doing it professionally?" And I thought, a Belgian thinks I write good English. Maybe I should take this more seriously. So one thing led to another. But fairness. I mean, every baby, every child alive, is born with to get their due deserts, and we can now measure in the brain what lights up and what doesn't light up. When you're kind of angry or when you're happy. And little babies will feel if their carer doesn't respond to them proportionally to something they feel that good has been done, or something, they get very disapproving. You can actually see you can see the dark parts of a brain working. Even from an infant, months old. And similarly, when they've done something wrong, they know they deserve some kind of penalty. But if the penalty is not proportional, then they think it's unfair. It just fell to me to kind of express this, and here I am, I'm about to enjoy my 75th birthday, still kind of wondering where it all came from. So I'm sorry, I can't answer your question really, but suffice to say that I'm pretty sure that you guys have got the same propensity, and I'm pretty sure that one of the reasons why Bylines is successful is that you play into that propensity, and why I'm pleased to support you.
That's great. Actually, my next question actually follows on very much from what you've just been saying, Will. You've already sort of referred to this about your writing. I'm wondering, is there a particular moment you think where, maybe you've already answered it, where journalism and writing took over from your economics work, being on the front line and so on, and why was that?
Well, I mean, I got interested in economics when I was taught by an inspirational A-level economics teacher. And actually, he wanted me to go and do PP at Oxford. And I was hell-bent on history at Cambridge. And suffice to say, I could have got into Oxford courtesy of my passion for economics. But the college in Cambridge, which I applied, didn't take state school kids as a matter of course. It's a completely forlorn hope, And I should have run with economics. And I went and did economics at Bristol University, which is where I got my degree in economics and sociology. And it was that pairing of economics and sociology, I think, was fundamental. Because, I began to see that actually the theories of economics made no sense unless you combined it with the social science prism through which sociology looks at the world. And here I am, I now find myself president of the Academy of Social Sciences at the age of 75, kind of in a way tribute to the kind of what I was taught over 50 years ago. It was obvious to me who populates the kind of economic textbooks I was taught didn't describe actually the way economics worked to me. On the other hand, it was clear that actually the market economy has certain dynamics you have to kind of comprehend. And then actually kind of class matters, power imbalance matters. If you want to understand dynamic things like innovation, then you have to understand kind of the social context in which innovation takes place. Durkheim, reading Weber, reading the great sociologists kind of in the original, and then at the same time having to read kind of, The Wealth of Nations. It was political economy, if you like, I was being taught at Bristol. And it's never left me. Never left me when I was an investment banker, as they'd now be called, and never left me as I went to pursue a career first in radio journalism, then in television journalism, and print journalism, and write my books. Really, I'm a political economist. I'm a political economist who believes that capitalism can be made to work for the common good, and that any capitalism that does not hardwire social justice and fairness into its warp and woof is going to fail in the medium to long run. And that is something I believe when I was 10 years old, and I believe when I'm 75. So what can I say?
You're right when you said before, absolutely, we got a shared passion, a shared commitment, and an agenda. And our citizen journalists, of which we have pushing for 2,000 of them now, writing for the 10 titles that we have across the country, I think all come with that passion as well in different ways. What have you learned about delivering on that agenda most effectively and making the economics of our society fairer? I'm wondering what your lessons are.
I've had two or three thoughts as you were speaking. First of all, I remember a great line from Nye Bevan. He was looking for a power lay, first of all, in Tredegar, and then, in Wales, and then when he became an MP, when he became Secretary of State, where did power lie? Actually, he was still kind of questing for it when he wrote in Place of Fear, fantastic book. Although I don't share his politics completely, what a fantastic book. Questing for how to have influence isn't just given to the passionate citizen journalism and Bylines. It's also a great politician like Nye Bevan. Secondly, I've had some successes in moving policy. I like to think. I think the kind of Section 172 of the 2006 Companies Act has something to do with me and the state we're in. I like to think that the New Deal programs of the new Labour government, Richard Layard was the supporter of the Employment Policy Institute, which I kind of was president of at the time, and that was we really influenced the Labour government then. But it's been a pretty thin gruel actually since then. 2010 to 2024, there wasn't much joy. We left the European Union, didn't want that to happen, and I'm not certain how things are going to pan out now. Actually, I wrote This Time No Mistakes. Some of what I argued for in This Time No Mistakes has been picked up and run with, but not as much as I hope when Keir Starmer endorsed the book. What moves policy is ideas, I think. And I'm hoping that some of the things I've championed over my career, stakeholder capitalism, public benefit companies in the utilities, why most of the European Union makes sense, trusting people in a welfare system that actually they want to live lives they have reason to value, and ultimately, if you trust them, they will repay that trust. The really importance of making our financial institutions, our banks, our insurance companies, our pension funds lean into investing in their home backyard, and to be patient and supporting innovation and investment over time, to always try and kind of include the workforce in your deliberations if you're a leading management team, kind of to get our democracy to work more effectively. I've been a critic of our democracy since my first book, The Revolution Never Was, back in the mid-'80s, and I was a final signatory of Charter 88, which. So, I've been at it for a long time, guys. If I'm brutal with myself, I'd have to say that, I can chalk up a few things which, stakeholder capitalism is an idea which I think I'm probably more closely associated with than anyone else. And to the extent, that's had a run, I was pleased about that, but it hasn't grown deep roots, in my view, or as deep roots as I would like. But I'm writing a series of reports for the Purposeful Company that I co-chair, a kind of liberal think tank, virtual think tank, business think tank. And I decided to kind of break up, rather than write a book, or to break it up into into sections, 3 sections, a trilogy, and how each one builds on the last. And so the final of the trilogy comes out in mid-late July. And I've been quite struck by the way that actually it is gathering momentum. So the ideas about, yes, we must get our asset owners, our great pension funds, to really support our startups and scale-ups. And yes, those startups and scale-ups must stay in the UK and not be sold, particularly to America. And yes, they must, both those startups and scale-ups, to the extent they're backed by British money and British pensioners, should lean into a responsible business agenda. And I'm quite struck by the way that's kind of going step by step like that, and trying to gather support and to kind of win over people and get them to have a stake in the project is actually really kind of working. For the first time, I mean, when I wrote The State We're In, I mean, the City of London regarded me as, wish I'd go away, really. And this time around, the City of London, the people who run the stock exchange, some of the people running our biggest banks and insurance companies, incredibly are backing and supporting and actually building on the things I'm suggesting. And I think the best in the trade union movement are also leading in. And there's a goodly number of the cabinet who I think kind of would accept these arguments, and I would include Wes Streeting in that. I would include Keir himself to a degree. So it's ideas matter ultimately. Someone to run with the bull, but with a great idea, and the wider context has got to be right. And brutally, the wider context hasn't been right until now. And I think that Trump and what's happening in the States is forcing us to kind of rethink how we run economy and society from first principles. I've reached an age, I'm 75 next birthday, which is next month, and I'm feeling I want to hand the baton on increasingly to the next generation, you too included, so you can run with the ball a bit before I finally, pop my clogs and say goodbye.
Do you want to run with the ball with another question, Yvonne?
Well, that was absolutely fascinating. I'd like just for a couple of moments just to focus on your book, This Time No Mistakes, which you've already referred to, and to ask, drawing on 200 years of history, what are the key lessons from the past that we need to learn right now?
Gosh, where do I begin? Bloody.
Yeah.
The New Deal worked in policy terms. The Keynesian settlement after the Second World War worked. The Thatcherite Revolution, which was meant to kind of repudiate New Deal and Keynesian thinking, has failed absolutely. Otherwise, we wouldn't be, to coin a phrase, in the state we're in 2025. So there's a few things to learn. What sits behind that learning is that you really mustn't believe that markets are magic or capitalism is magic. It's not. It is profound imperfections. Needs to be. It does produce wealth. It does produce innovation, and it has the advantage of lots of runners and riders, so that through experimentation we get to the right answer. But it has a propensity for inequality. It has a propensity to monopoly. It has a propensity to oppress. It has a propensity to exclude. It has a phenomenal inbuilt instabilities that have to be proactively managed by public agencies, and that is elected governments. And that's the alchemy. What sits behind that is actually a recognition that if you run a society by asserting egotism, individualism, it's all about me, a kind of me society or an I society. Say, crucially, excuse my language, what's coming, fuck off you, fuck off the rest of the world. It doesn't work. Societies are complicated skeins of interactivity and reciprocity and bonds of trust. And actually, one of the reasons I'm so critical of what Trump is doing is it's classic me society. He says the only novel he's ever read is by Ayn Rand, who was the kind of high priestess of individualism. And I'm sure that's true, by the way. The hero or heroine kind of makes the world bend to his or her will and devil take the hindmost. That's very much Trump's worldview. Actually, you have to marry mutuality, fellowship. I have your back, you have my back. We human beings are social animals. We developed because we were, and language developed, the capacity to speak because it became more effective to hunt in groups and to share the spoils together. The fairness gene, of which I spoke earlier. These are all fundamental to the human beings. And so, yes, everybody is ambitious for themselves. I'm sure you both are. You've got priorities which are different from one another, and you want to achieve the best you can in your life. You only got one life. I understand that. We all only got one life. But equally, we're members of society. And I do think that William Morris, who coined this phrase, fellowship being the kind of life of the world, and which Clem Attlee, when he was asked to define socialism, always referred back to William Morris, a great figure, actually, kind of designer and artist and political and actually theological thinker. kind of the late 19th century. Wonderful books, kind of slightly odd when you read them now, but nonetheless, the spirit is there, fellowship. So it's the marrying of the we, if you like, with the I, integrating kind of fellowship and all that goes with it, with also recognition that the point of it, I want to express solidarity with you two and have structures as far as I can express solidarities with, in the various kind of concentric circles with which I can represent my will for fellowship. So I can live better, and it gives me pleasure that you can live better, and together we all prosper. So that is that kind of thinking behind the New Deal. It was that kind of thinking behind the Keynesian settlement, and it was that kind of thinking which was absent from the Thatcher experiment in '79. So, you've got to get your philosophy right, and from the philosophy comes good policy. And I guess that's my big learning.
You mentioned Trump, and the other, I guess, key figure in the States at the moment and globally is Musk. And I'm just wondering, where does big tech and developments around big tech fit into that picture?
Elon Musk, at one time he was a Democrat. And at one point, Tesla was his contribution to kind of electrifying transport and his contribution to net zero. I mean, he's turned in a sixpence. I think his son, as he would say, being brainwashed into, changing it, becoming a trans woman, it's kind of very much influenced him. He became a kind of anti-woke figure, and he bought X to kind of campaign against wokery, really. And in so doing, has turned it into something kind of much darker. The other dimension of this is that even Zuckerberg, there's a new book out on Zuckerberg, actually, and Facebook, and the way in which, once it grew out of a tool to kind of promote friendship and fellowship at Harvard, which is where it began, he began to get more and more and more titanic ambitions about it. And the more titanic his ambitions, the more manipulative he was prepared to accept that this social tool, this social media tool should be. Again, it's the story of capitalism, as I mentioned earlier. I mean, the wonderful thing about capitalism is it permits people to create social media platforms, which actually certainly it's unlikely the state would have done, because it allows individuals to come up with ideas, run with the ball, and if they flourish, hey presto, you get a Facebook, you get a Microsoft, but here's the point: you get monopoly, you get inequity, and you have to manage it. It's been the story of capitalism since whenever, and actually, if we don't want kind of boys in their bedroom watching porn and and learning how to be ever more violent, we've got to control what goes on these platforms. So it's a kind of age-old thing. I mean, Keynes would have said the same thing in the 1930s about capitalism kind of going feral. Then it's just going feral in a different guise, in a different place. And we, the policymakers, and you, kind of citizen journalists, we have to kind of think through what we think democracies and our democratic government how they should react, and we want to come up with policy tools. And you ask citizen journalists how they can influence things. It's through good reporting, it's exposing the kind of ills of this kind of unfettered universe, but at the same time, actually exploring the ways it can be kind of made better. I mean, we need citizen journalists, we need vigorous journalists, but you also need great politicians. We need both. When I look back at my own career, I sometimes wonder whether I wouldn't be better off, rather than kind of commenting from the sidelines, actually getting stuck in. And I think it's a question that all your younger men and women writing about Bylines should think. Some of them should go on and make careers in journalism, where they can make a fantastic contribution, but some of them maybe should get into politics.
I'm kind of going to go back to the kind of big tech stuff and thinking about AI. In Northeast Bylines, there's been a range of opinions on using AI and so on. And I understand that you think of it as a potentially progressive force. What do we need to know to embrace AI in a safe and progressive way?
There hasn't been a great invention since the beginning of time where actually the benefits fell always initially to the plutocratic elite. And that's happening with AI big time. And society has to fight back. And that's the story of the last kind of 1,500 years, 2,000 years. There's quite a good new film out. What's it called? The Game of Thinking, I think, or The Thinking Game, on Demis Hassabis, the founder and managing director of DeepMind. And he's interesting about this. He thinks AI can be a force for good. So he's having his battle royal with Google, who is owners, but he's still sticking to his guns. The large language models that the LLMs allowed him to kind of break down the protein structures of 200 million proteins. For Christ's sake, that's amazing. You just have to stay on these platforms. We have to insist that that the government, in the same way that you we've regulated the printed word, the same way we've regulated banks, the same way you can't sell drugs unless they've gone through through a drugs approval process. You can't get online unless you meet certain standards and conduct standards. And if you don't, you get kicked off. I mean, we just have to be that tough. And here, I think one has to work with the Europeans who do take this view, and one country in this world can't change it. We have to work with people who think like us, ultimately, if we're to change the dynamics.
There is a fear that's being expressed that the changing of what is going into AI, in America particularly, what is being removed from libraries, what's being removed from sources, might eventually shift AI rightwards. So I wonder if there's something about AI and challenging populism generally.
I think Trump's doing the work, doing some of the heavy lifting for us, actually. I do think that populist parties are having a reverse. I mean, look at what's happening in Canada. Look what's happening in mainland Europe now, actually. I noticed that Farage's rally in Sheffield? You might have been there covering it, but I was not as well attended as he hoped. I hazard a guess that actually Farage's reform may not do as well in these May elections as he hoped to do kind of even before Trump was elected. I think that people are reappraising kind of all across our continent. They don't like this kind of Putin-Trump axis. And actually, the British working class know which way is up. They know that neither Trump nor Putin is good news. And actually, politicians like Farage, who suck up to both of them, are not good news. But we also have to kind of attack the roots of it. And I think the roots of it do lie in constructing economies and societies which brutally do not work sufficiently for the common good. And I'd like to see this Labour government really kind of starting to aggressively working for common good outcomes in the way the economy works and the way our society works, and to use your fiscal rules to kind of serve that end rather than fiscal rules undermining its attempts to serve that end. That can be done. I've written about that. Refer to kind of my columns and you'll see my answers. But we can spend money on capital, we can spend money on innovation, we can spend money actually investing in our people. If you want to solve, long-term unemployment or people on disabilities that maybe they have an opportunity to work but they're not taking it because of the generosity of the benefits and all that stuff. If you want to solve that riddle, you've got to trust them, and you've got to invest in providing them work and actually rewarding them if they go back to work, and invest in rewarding the employers who take them on. And we have to make sure that people of this country, solidaristically, in the name of fellowship, we are working for common good outcomes and trying to create an economy and society that work for everybody, actually, and everyone has an opportunity to live a life they have reason to value. A world in which there is a social floor, but on which no one can fall, and a world in which there are ladders of opportunity up which everyone can climb. Do that demonstrably, and at the same time, call out Farage and his people for being misogynists and sexists and for sucking up to the world of Putin and Trump, and we'll win. We'll see them off.
Fantastic.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time, Will. It's been great.
Really, I'm a fan of what you do, and it's a privilege to be asked. Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
All right. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.